Hello everyone. In the previous two videos, we looked at the main settings that you wanted to do in order to optimize and secure your Zoom account. In the next few videos, we're going to take a look at some of the operational settings that you can change when you're either creating a meeting or when you are actually in the middle of running a meeting to really enhance your delivery and your presentations that you're doing. So the first thing we want to do is to take a look at the settings for actually initiating and creating a meeting and how we can change those default settings that we've set in our main settings if it's appropriate for that particular type of meeting. So what we need to do is to click up and go to My Account, and then in your Personal tab down on the left-hand side, you will see an option for a meeting. So this is where you will see the upcoming meetings that you've got scheduled, as well as the ability to schedule a new meeting. When you click on the option to schedule a new meeting, what this gives you the ability to do is to set the name for your meeting or a topic so that it's something that's identifiable. You can add a description for the meeting, which is optional. And then you have the ability, if you've saved meeting settings as a template, then you've got the ability to incorporate that template to save you a little bit of time in the process of optimizing the account. You then have the ability to choose when that meeting is going to be held by selecting the day and then the time. One of the challenges with choosing the time within creating a meeting on Zoom is it doesn't operate within a 15-minute interval. So the meetings need to start either on a half hour or an hour component. So you would start your meeting the schedule for earlier than what you would want to do, but then in your settings when you were sending the invitation, you would make sure that you were adjusting that timing at that component. So if we were setting a meeting for tomorrow evening or for April 2nd at 5 p.m., I could choose how long I wanted that meeting to run, and we do have the ability in the length of the meeting to choose in 15-minute intervals for how long that meeting is going to be, as far as the time zone as well. We also have the ability to set that this is going to be a recurring meeting if it is something that is going to be happening again and again. For example, if you are scheduling meetings for an ongoing course, you could simply set your timing of when it's going to be. Is it going to be weekly? And you could repeat it every week. And you would say if you were dealing with, for example, a Tuesday, Thursday class, and then you could set when is that going to end, so the end date for the meeting series. Or you could choose it to set to end after a certain number of occurrences. The advantage that this does is it allows you to have all of those class sessions scheduled with a single link to the URL, so that you don't need to be constantly creating a new one and creating a new meeting every time. By going through and setting things up once, it can get you into the position to do that. So I'm just going to turn that feature off right now. The registration option is one that if you click require people to register, then there'll be a form that they'll have to put information in to be able to attend the session and to get the contact details. So the link wouldn't give them the details to go straight into the meeting, but would take them to a registration page, which would then provide them with the contact details from that. This is a great option if you're using this as a business meeting and you're doing a webinar or something like that and you wanted to get people's registration as part of it. But because of the fact that if you're using this in a teaching format where you're going to be having students who are already registered in the class, there's no need to be able to do that. One of the next things is the meeting ID. Now, remember we talked about in the general settings that using your personal meeting ID is not a good idea when you're dealing with scheduling classes. I use those when I'm doing instant meetings or things like that. And I also use it for my student hours. So students know how they can reach out to me within Zoom easily. I don't know if they're going to be connecting in, but it allows us to be able to do that. Generally, what you'll want to do is to use the generate the meeting idea automatically. And that was one of the settings that we did in our main settings. You can require an additional meeting password. So this is something that you have the ability to do if you wanted to add a second layer of security. Remember, we mentioned that it's a great idea to only provide the link for the Zoom meeting in Brightspace for the particular sections, because that means it's only going to be seen by those students that have access to that content. But if you wanted to add a second layer of security, if you will, you could assign a specific meeting password for that, and that's where you would choose to use just a random one, or you could pick one that you wanted to have. Now, back in our previous session, we had our default settings set that the host and the participant video was off. If for whatever reason you wanted to override those default settings, this is where you would set the information in. And this is also where you would set the change if you wanted to change the dial-in information, as well as allowing them to dial in by phone or by computer audio. Now, down here in our meeting options, remember we turned on the meeting options for a breakout rooms. And so this is where we're going to take a look at how we can use these while we're in the middle of a class delivery in one of the upcoming presentations. But you actually have the ability to set this to be able to have the breakout rooms pre-assigned at this point. So I usually, as we talked about in our settings, like to allow them to join before the host, not using a meeting room to have them aggregate in first before we bring them in, and I mute participants on entry. That tends to be one of my main defaults that we go through from there. Now, I also sit here, if I want the meeting to be automatically recorded to the cloud, I can access that and choose to do that right within my meeting settings. But if I choose to go to the breakout rooms, I have the ability to either click create a room, and what this allows me to do is I can then assign participants to the room by putting their specific email in. Now, if you were going to be doing that as an advanced feature, you would want to make sure that the students were logging in to Zoom using their course email address so that you knew who they were and were able to align that, and that they're not using a generic email address that's not the one that they use for the class. So this gives you the ability where you can actually create up to 50 different breakout rooms and assign up to 200 participants into various rooms as a pre-assigned component. We'll also show you that when you're actually in the meeting and running a meeting, you can randomly assign people or manually assign people to the rooms as you're going along. So it really depends upon the number of individuals that you're going to have as far as whether you would want to do it as a breakout in advance. And one of the things that is important to realize is that if you have participants that are not already assigned to breakout rooms, it will assign those that have allocations, and then you can manually add those ones that you did not necessarily have in that initial setting. So that's a really great time saver if you're working on dealing with your breakout rooms. This is also where if you wanted to add somebody who was going to be an alternate host, but you don't need to do this at this part. You can add them as a host once the meeting is underway. You can then give them the ability to share their screen and go into presenter mode at that point. So once we've got all of these settings, and you can see where the main aspects of this were what we had set in those pre-settings to get our defaults where we're generally going to do, and then we're only going to be making adjustments to it in the meeting schedule. So I'm just going to call this tutorial test meeting so that I can remove it afterwards, and then you click save. Now, once you have saved that meeting, then it gives you the ability to add it to your calendar, regardless of what type of format that you've got. And it reiterates what are the settings that you've got set up for that particular meeting. Now, there's two ways that you can invite people to join the meeting. If it's their first Zoom meeting, you may want to do an invitation to do that. Or if you've covered Zoom as part of your course outline or your introduction, you can simply provide them with the join URL. If you choose to copy the invitation, then what this does is this provides you with the main numbers that they can call to call from within Canada, the meeting ID, a link to be able to go to the main number, as well as the details. Now, this is where if you had a session that was supposed to be beginning, say, at 1:15, and you needed to set the start time for the meeting for 1, this is where once you've copied this information and put it in the email that you would be sending to them, you would change the time to the actual start time. Even though as far as Zoom is concerned, the meeting is going to be available early, you want to make sure that the attendees know when that's going to come into play. Now, one of the other things that we've got the ability to do is down here, we have the ability to create polls. These polls give you the ability to create added engagement in the middle of the class as well. So by simply adding a poll, we can give the poll a title. We'll call this test poll. And then we can choose if we want people to be able to respond to the poll anonymously or not. And if you do it as anonymous, the information that they do will be anonymous from that, obviously. We can type in our question. So this will be our test question. And then you can choose, do you want this to be a single choice or can they choose multiple options? And then you simply provide the options for the answers, and then you can add additional questions as part of the same poll. Now, if we remove and let's go back into this one. So we edit that question, we'll say yes, and then the other option will be no. We have to have at least 2 options that are contained in there. Let's make this a single choice, and let's delete that second question, and then we click save. So now what we've got is we see our poll number 1, which has 1 question, is there and is available for the meeting. We can then continue to add additional questions that we want to sort of have to try to create engagement in much the same way as we might use clicker or voting technology or survey tools in a physical face-to-face class. So these are some key opportunities that you've got. You also have the option here that once you click the meeting, you can then choose to go live and stream that meeting on Facebook Live, Workplace by Facebook, or YouTube. Now, one of the things that's important is you can set up private live streams on YouTube so that only the invited individuals or only those who have the URL are able to access it. So this would be a way to expand the number of users that were able to access the recording. They wouldn't have the same interactivity that the users within Zoom would have, but they would still be able to watch the presentation as it was going on those live platforms. So that's a couple of the key things with regards to setting up your meeting. And then when you're ready to start your meeting, all you do is you go to your upcoming meetings, find where your meeting is, and then click the start button. And so that's really easy when you go from that point to get things going. Now, if you've had attendees that are already logged in, what you will see is a little green dot to the left-hand side of the meeting that indicates that there's already somebody there that's in the meeting. So if I chose to start this meeting early, Zoom is going to go in and it's going to open up the Zoom app, pull the meeting up, get us to where we're ready to go. I'm just going to take this full screen. And so now this test meeting would be ready to operate. Now you'll remember that we set things up so that our video was going to be turned off so that we weren't having that exposed as we go to get started with things. And we have the ability to adjust and choose what video settings do we want to use, what cameras do we want to take a look at, and we also have the ability to choose a virtual background for our meeting. So this is where, as an example, if you wanted to have a different background in the meeting, so if I wanted to I should flip that around. If I wanted to have a presentation like I was outside in a building, and should bear in mind that right now I have no green screen behind me. If you're using a green screen, it can be much sharper and much more precise, but this allows you to upload images to have as background images and add a little bit of fun into your presentation and to make it just a little bit more different with regards to the virtual background. This is also a really great feature that your attendees can use if they want to provide a little bit more privacy for not sharing what their home is like or their environment where they're presenting. Still allows to have that physical content coming in and just gives things a little bit more of an advanced look from what you're doing from the presentation. In these settings, we also have the ability to make changes while we are getting ready to run the course or run our presentation. If you have multiple monitors set up to your computer system, this can allow you to have your groups where you can see who's in the meeting on one and have an entire monitor just for your shared screen. You also have the ability to choose, do you want to have a side-by-side mode that's going to have your shared screen to the left and then participant video is going to be on the right. And we also can have the ability to make changes to what we're dealing with as we're going on. So if I get rid of that mirror my video section and I go back to my virtual background, now we see that things are not being mirrored, and now we can be actually doing our presentation in front of the Faculty of Business building in more appropriate times when things were sunny as we were going. We also have the ability to change what is the audio device that we're going to be using for the meeting, and we can choose from any of our connected audio devices, check to see what the input levels is, checking our speakers to make sure that everything is working. This is always a great test to do before anybody starts to arrive for your session and before you go live. This is one of the reasons why I don't have my video started when I first come in, because I always like to have my video off and my session muted while I go in and make sure that all my settings are appropriate and there's no challenges and that everything's working right before the session begins. This is also where you would have the ability to choose, are you going to allow recording? Do you want to optimize it for the third-party video editor? What do you want to do with regards to that particular recording? One of the things that's interesting here as well is it gives you the ability to record a separate audio file for each participant. So this is where if you wanted to isolate things out, when it's saved, you would have a single audio track for each of the individuals that was involved in that conversation or was talking. And so this is just a way that, while it creates a larger file size, gives you a little bit better editing within post-production. So as an example, if you had multiple people that were sort of speaking a little bit at the same time, but you wanted to preserve one of those people's voices for the recorded presentation and remove the other, then that's something that would easily be able to be done if you had separate audio files for each recording. You also have the ability to see the statistics of what are going on from that particular presentation. How are things running on your power? There's also a great little set of shortcuts that I would sort of suggest that you may want to write down for your keyboard, because what this is going to allow you to do is to, without having to go and click up into the menu key, be able to, with your keyboard, do some basic functions that you might want to be using while you're delivering the session. So this is a great little cheat sheet to be able to take some shots and give you a little bit more settings. What I might do is I might sort of upload one and have the compiled sheet available for everybody following these sessions. Under the Accessibility tab, this is where if you've chosen to enable closed captioning on this, now bear in mind it doesn't do automatic closed captioning. But if you've got somebody who's doing the manual typing while the presentations are going on, or if you've got a script that you've recorded, you could be adding the closed captioning as you go with the presentation if you've chosen to do that. If not, this is always an important feature to incorporate into your post-production, so that if anybody has audio needs where they need to visually see because of hearing challenges, then they would be able to have access to those subtitles and make your recording of the presentation more valuable at the end of the day as well. So those are the settings that you can access when you go into your video settings. On your audio, this is giving you the ability to do a test, to change your settings, and to change your microphone and your speakers that you are going to be using for this particular presentation or this session. So if I just enable my video there, we should go back and save that and get rid of that virtual background that we had. So if we go into the video, over here in the navigations on the side, one of the things that we have the capabilities to do is to enable our participant video. When you're in a full screen mode, I'm just going to make this a little bit larger. When you're in a full screen mode of your presentation, your participant list is going to be overlaid on top of the presentation. If, however, you simply make the window of the Zoom meeting being larger, or if you use the keys from there, we see that we've lost that. So if we exit that full screen mode and just have the Zoom being larger, we're able to see the attendees on our meeting coming here in on the left right-hand side, and then we can have our chat window open on the bottom. The advantage of doing this rather than going full screen is it gives you the ability, if you have a single monitor, to be able to manage your participants, to be able to see what's happening within that, and to work with your chat as it's going on. Now, a couple of things that are important when we're looking at the attendees that are within there. Obviously, when we've got the host, I could unmute myself. And this is where if you have attendees that are in and they've been automatically muted, they have the ability to unmute themselves, or you can mute or unmute everybody automatically. That's a great feature if you've got somebody who has forgotten to mute themselves when they came into the meeting. And then this would give you the ability to then just mute everybody to make sure that it's there. But you can choose, do you want to allow them to unmute themselves or not? We also have the ability under the More tab to be able to change and make changes by the muting the participants on entry or etc. contained right within there. Now, up here, this is where we have those non-verbal cues that we sort of talked about. So this is where people can respond yes or no, go slower, go faster, or they can provide thumbs up, claps, I need a coffee break, or I'm away. So if somebody needs to step away, they can put that sign up there and it gives you an idea that they're not going to be there. And so it allows you to optimize those non-verbal cues while you're delivering that session or that presentation. Now, if you have chosen not to record that presentation, then you have the ability to click the record button at this point in time, and then that would allow you to either, well, I'm muted right now, so that's why it would say I'm going to have it record without the audio. And now up here on the left-hand side, we see that that is being recorded, and I can either pause that recording or stop that recording at any time. And so I stop it because I've got this set by my defaults to record to the cloud, then it's going to do that and then send me an email when that's available. Now down here as well in the bottom navigation window, this is where under the More tab, we could choose to go live on one of these platforms while we're doing the Zoom meeting. And we also have the ability to go to our breakout rooms. So this would be where if we had a certain number of participants in, we could choose how many breakout rooms we want them to be and assign them automatically, and then simply click Create Breakout Rooms. Or I could go manually, and when I say to create the breakout rooms, I could then add a name into the individual rooms. I could choose to assign, and this is where I would then be doing any assigning of people to rooms if they weren't done automatically, and to be able to pull that together. I also have the ability to move all participants into a breakout room automatically if I want. And if I want them to stay in that breakout room, I can allow them to return to the main session at any time, or I can choose to have the breakout rooms close after a certain number of time minutes. So if I wanted to give the students a 10-minute project to be able to work on independently in their groups, I can set that for 10 minutes. It'll notify me when the time's up. The breakout rooms will automatically close. The students will come back into your main session, and within their breakout room, I can choose how many seconds do I want to give them as a countdown, as a warning that the room is going to be closing and they're going to be brought back to the room. So on this aspect, it actually works significantly better than if you're using physical breakout rooms, having to try to go around to every room, get people knowing that the sessions are being able to be finished, and trying to bring them back into your class where you're going. So that's a really good section in the options. Under the Recreate, if we don't like the way our rooms are set up, then I can say I want to redo the rooms, and that basically wipes out the assignments, and I can go through and manually reassign them at that time. So once we've got individuals assigned, I could simply click Open All Rooms, and it's good to go. And so that's where we have a lot of functionality that is built into when we're running these sessions to be able to create levels of engagement within the classes, even though we're dealing with the online environment from that perspective. So that's one of the key things that we have when we're taking a look at running a session within Zoom. We'll be taking a look at some additional features in later presentations, but this was one of the main ones we wanted to do to show you how to start a meeting and how you can manage and control some of the settings within the meeting to create higher levels of engagement. If you've got any questions, please let me know.